The Voynich Manuscript, 600 years old, sitting on a shelf at Yale University, and not one human being alive has ever read a single sentence of it. Think about that. We have cracked the languages of vanished empires. We read writing scratched into clay 4,000 years ago. We broke the codes a wartime computer was built to break. But this book, written in a quiet, careful hand around the year 1420, still says nothing to us. Plants you cannot find in any garden, creatures that match no living species, and running under all of it, page after page, a script that looks like real writing in every way except one. It will not give up what it says. So here is the question that has chased code breakers and linguists for 100 years. Is this a real language hiding under a clever lock? Is it a code so well made that nothing we have built can open it? Or is it the most patient and elegant fake in human history? To even begin to answer that, we have to start with the man who pulled it out of the dark. Sometime around 1912, a rare book dealer walked into a collection the Jesuits were quietly selling off. His name was Wilfrid Voynich. The pile was old manuscripts the world had mostly forgotten. He bought several, and Aristotle was in the pile. So was this. He took it home, and his life was never quite the same after that. He believed he had found something that would, in his own words, startle the scientific world. In 1921, he toured the United States showing pages from it to anyone who would look. He gave the book his own name, and the book outlived him, still silent. It changed hands. Eventually, in 1969, another dealer donated it to Yale. They catalogued it very simply as MS 408. Their own description is honest in a way you rarely see in a library catalog. A scientific or magical text in an unidentified language in cipher. But to know what we are even looking at, we have to go back further than 1912, further than Voynich. We have to go back to the animal whose skin became the page. In January of 2009, a team cut 4 tiny strips of parchment out of the book. 4 leaves. They cleaned the samples to remove handling oils, the touch of every hand that had ever turned those pages. Then they burned what was left in a vacuum, captured the carbon, and fed it into a machine that can tell you by counting atoms roughly when a living thing stopped being alive. The answer came back in February of 2011. The vellum was made from animals that died in the early 1400s. The range, with very high confidence, sits between 1404 and 1438. The middle of that window is about 1421. That is not a guess. That is physics. But here is the strange part. Dating the parchment tells you when the animal died. It does not tell you when somebody picked up a quill and wrote on it. A clever forger working 100 years later could have bought a stack of old blank vellum and used it. So a second team working with microscopes and chemistry looked at the inks and pigments themselves. Their work became the first basic forensic picture of what this book physically is. So we know roughly when, the where, and the who are harder, and the pictures are about to make it worse. The pictures in the book are unlike anything else from their time. Strange flowers with roots like coiled snakes. Leaves that fold the wrong way. Some scholars who have studied medieval art suggest the style looks Italian from the early years of the Renaissance, though others are not so sure. The book does not match anything cleanly. That is part of what makes it so unsettling. It looks like it belongs to the world we know, and then the closer you look, it does not. It is broken into rough sections, a section of plants, a section of strange astronomical drawings, a section that some have read tentatively as a kind of medieval medical book, with what look like therapeutic baths and pharmaceutical jars, though that reading is still debated. Maybe six picture sections in total, and people have spent careers arguing about what each one is even for. The plants are not real plants, or if they are, no botanist alive has been able to point to one and name it, and yet the book is not random. In 2024, two researchers noticed something nobody had quite pinned down before. The drawing styles on the plant pages are not all the same. There is more than one artist. There is more than one hand. Once you see it, you start to see it everywhere, which means somebody else was in the room. And when you look at the writing itself, that second presence gets harder to ignore. A man named Prescott Currier, Captain Currier, turned his attention to the script. He saw what no one had seen before. The writing was not all the same. There were two distinct styles of text in the book, statistically different from each other, as if two different people had written it. Scholars still call them simply Courier A and Courier B. For a long time, that was a clue without a key. Then, very recently, a researcher ran a modern statistical model on the manuscript without telling it which folios belong to which scribe. The model, on its own, sorted the pages into two groups with about 90% accuracy. The same two groups Currier had spotted by eye. The split is real. It is sitting there in the math. If this were a meaningless string of doodles, you would not expect it to break so cleanly into two consistent styles. That is the behavior of language, or of two scribes copying from something. So if it is language, what language? A century of brilliant people have tried to answer that. They have all walked into the same wall. Almost every year, somebody announces that they have cracked it. In 1921, soon after Voynich brought it to America, a respected professor declared he had broken the code by reading tiny strokes inside each letter as a kind of shorthand. The reading was beautiful, and it was wrong. It collapsed under inspection. In 2014, a British academic claimed to have figured out about 10 words, mostly the names of plants and stars, though that claim was not accepted by mainstream scholarship. In 2017, a researcher writing in a major literary magazine announced the book was a women's health guide written in shorthand Latin. Medievalists rejected it almost the same week. In 2018, two computer scientists at a Canadian university used artificial intelligence to argue the language was Hebrew, with the letters scrambled. The headlines, briefly, were everywhere. The authors themselves had to publicly remind people they had not actually translated the book. The pattern by now is its own thing. A new claim arrives. The press gets excited. Specialists look closer. The claim quietly dies. One linguist has gone so far as to argue, on the record, that the manuscript may simply be impossible to read. As recently as 2019, scholars noted that new decipherments keep appearing and keep failing the same way, which forces a darker possibility onto the table. What if every one of them failed because there is nothing inside the book to read? In the early 2000s, a British professor proposed something that should have ended the whole story. He suggested the book may have been very deliberately a fake, though this view remains contested. Not a copy of anything, not a code for anything. An elaborate forgery made to look mysterious, sold to a wealthy buyer who wanted to own a secret. He even showed how it could have been done. A simple medieval trick. A card with windows cut into it slid over a table of made up syllables, generating an endless stream of fake words. A patient forger, working for weeks, could produce a book that looked exactly like this one. There would be nothing inside it, just shape. It is a clean, elegant answer, and it almost holds. But then somebody ran the statistics on Voynich, treating it the way linguists treat any unknown text. The results were not what a forgery should look like. The patterns in the words, the way certain shapes follow others, the rhythm of repetition across pages look to many researchers more like the patterns languages make than like noise, though this is still debated, not exactly like any one language we know. One major review concluded carefully that the statistical fingerprint is not consistent with a simple hoax. And then there are the things even the hoax theory cannot easily explain. The word lengths in Voynich follow a very particular mathematical curve, one not seen in ordinary writing. Words on the same line often repeat with tiny variations in a way no natural language quite does. So even if it is language, it is a strange one. And if it is a hoax, it is one done so well that 600 years later machines still cannot tell, which leaves us after a century of work with the answer nobody wanted. We do not know. Step back for a moment from the theories. Just look at the book. Somebody 600 years ago sat down with a stack of clean vellum and a quill and made this. They drew every plant, they drew every star, they wrote in careful, even strokes something they understood or wanted you to think they understood. They lived an entire life around this object, then they died. The book passed through hands we will never know, ended up at one point with an emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and finally landed in a climate controlled room in Connecticut. And every smart, patient, obsessive person who has bent over its pages since has come away with the same thing: silence. Stop and feel that for a second. Someone stood at a desk 600 years ago, lit by a candle, and put marks on a page with the patience of a person who believed it mattered. And it survived. The fire never found it. The flood never found it. War never found it. It is right here, every page intact, the ink still dark, and we cannot hear them. The honest researchers today do not claim to have read it. They say its origins, authorship, and purpose remain unresolved, and the field still lacks the context to settle them. Maybe one day a missing piece will turn up in another library, in another country, in another quiet archive, and the lock will click open. Maybe a model not yet built will see the pattern we cannot, or maybe this book will sit at Yale for another 600 years, a small, stubborn island of meaning we cannot reach. And that is what the Voynich Manuscript keeps trying to teach us. A whole world of knowledge, a person's life of careful work can survive perfectly intact right in front of us and still be lost. Not destroyed, not burned, just unreadable. History is not only what we have forgotten, it is also what is still right here, waiting, and we cannot yet see. The deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. So stay with us. The past is not done surprising you. We will see you on the next one.